Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to go over a true crime story, and this story is about Chad O'Melia and how he was murdered and how the murderer, Bryn Spejcher, was charged with manslaughter, but she ended up not serving any prison time. So let's start out with Bryn Spejcher's backstory. She grew up in Bloomingdale, which is a suburban area in Chicago, with her parents, her 3 brothers, and a lot of pets. She had a hearing problem and she had to wear hearing aids starting at the age of 4. And this sparked an interest in her to help other people with hearing loss issues. So she ended up earning her master's degree at Washington University in St. Louis to begin her career as an audiologist. And then she moved to Thousand Oaks, California. In Thousand Oaks, California, she lived there with her hearing service dog, Aria, who was a husky, and she would take her dog to the dog park after work and spend hours there just letting her dog have fun, but also to help her meet new people since she didn't know anyone in Thousand Oaks. And at this dog park, this is where she met Chad O'Melia. Chad O'Melia had a dog of his own. Her name was Athena. And the two of them started to become friends and they started to hang out. So it was Memorial Day weekend. After a visit to the dog park, Spejcher and O'Melia went back to his condominium, and she describes this event by before she gets to the condo, she lets her dog walk around the grass area to go potty before she takes him up to the condominium. She goes into his condo and they sit on the couch and talk for about an hour, just talking about what they did over the weekend. And then Chad mentions that he's gonna start getting ready for bed soon, and she already knows that when he gets ready for bed, he likes to smoke marijuana. So he has like all of his paraphernalia and things on his porch, and she knew that he was going to be a while out with his things, doing his thing out on the porch, so she went outside and joined him while he smoked. While he was smoking, Bryn asked him for a hit, and this wasn't the first time that she's smoked from his bong. There was one other time where she took a hit and it was just a normal high. She described as just a normal high. This time when she took a hit, she said she didn't feel anything. And so Chad thought it would be a good idea to get this really strong strain of weed. Apparently, I don't know what kind of strain it was, but apparently it was like the strongest strain being offered at the dispensary in California at the time. And he started to load the bong with it, and he did what was called stacking hits, where you basically just burn the weed in the bowl for a long time, and the cloud, the smoke in the bong starts to get really, really milky. So he was trying to get her really high because the first hit, she didn't feel anything. So he was kind of in my perspective, experimenting with her and maybe screwing with her a little bit, because I don't understand why you would jump from, because she was not an experienced smoker. I think she only smoked a few times before this, and so this isn't something that you would typically do for a new smoker. You wouldn't get your strongest strain and just start making the milkiest cloud you can get for them to take a hit off the bong from. And apparently before this happened, his roommate, he did the exact same thing with his roommate, where he loaded the bong with this strong strain and then started stacking hits, and it made his roommate so crazy that his roommate like ended up having an anxiety attack and like ran out of the condo, and like I'm not exactly sure what happened. I think he like disappeared for a while until his high came back down, and like obviously had a very strong reaction, and that just kind of shows you how strong this weed was. And so he thought it was funny, and I think I'm thinking he thought that it would be, he wanted to see how Bryn would react. So he gives her the bong and she takes a hit, and this is where she loses touch with reality. She has cannabis induced psychosis. And I know a lot of you probably disagree, but this is a thing. It does happen to some people, and it can happen with certain strains. Some people think that the weed he gave her was laced, which is possible. I don't know if they had it tested, but to everyone's knowledge, it was just a really strong strain. So she went into a cannabis-induced psychosis, and she described it as having no sense of time, no sense of morality, judgment, or emotions. And honestly, I just want to share that I've experienced cannabis-induced psychosis before. When I was younger, I made a very, very, very strong batch of edibles. I put 17 grams of cannabis into one little batch of brownies and then ate a lot of them. And basically, I thought I was tripping so hard, and I was in Vegas, and I was walking on the strip in Vegas, and I thought I was in hell, like walking around in Vegas and seeing people and like seeing things. I thought that I had died somehow, and I just didn't remember how I died, and now I was in hell. And I swear to God, like I'm not making this up, I was out of it. And yeah, later that night I ended up thinking that one of my brothers was trying to murder me, when in reality he was just in the bathroom throwing up because he ate too many edibles too. And it was just a big shit show, honestly. But I honestly can say that I experienced like a level of cannabis-induced psychosis. And so I believe her when she says that she experienced that. So she, like if I remember right, because she was on the Dr. Phil show, and you can check out the Dr. Phil interview with her on YouTube. So she talks about how she went inside and she was asking him for water, and he was trying to help calm her down, and she was kind of losing it. And then she describes that she saw a television screen, and she was watching the screen like it was showing a show, and she's watching through the screen and she sees Athena, but in the show, like in her psychosis, she sees a dog, and she sees a hand start stabbing the dog. And then she hears Chad say, "Hey, what are you doing to my dog?" And that's when she saw the hand start stabbing Chad. And this is where she ended up stabbing him 108 times. And obviously murdered him. And she said that while she was watching the screen, she was horrified, but there was nothing she could do to stop it. And I just want to pause here. I've heard of other people saying, like, people that have had psychosis, like there was one man I knew, he was actually my old roommate, which was scary in hindsight, but he told me that he went through a psychotic break, and he basically described the exact same thing, where he was watching, he didn't say a screen, but he said he was watching hands murder his own cats. And when he came out of the psychosis, he realized it was his cats and that he killed them. And this was like a nice guy, and I believe him. I don't think he's not the type to just like murder his own cats. He was crying when he was remembering it because he loved his cats so much. But psychosis, like like she said, your emotions and morality turn off and you lose control, and it's almost like you're just watching your own self on autopilot. And my own perspective too is I believe that marijuana and other drugs can open up the door for demonic possession. And I know a lot of you will probably say that, okay, that's crazy, but that's just my view, that's my perspective. I don't believe that cannabis attracts demons, and I don't believe that every time you get high, you're like inviting demons in, but I do think that it can happen, and sometimes it does. And in this case, it's kind of obvious to me that it is demonic. But anyway, she watches him get stabbed, and then she watches the hand in the screen start stabbing herself. And this is when the cops came in. The cops had to beat her with a baton to get her to stop stabbing herself. I think they had to beat her 9 times. They ended up breaking her arm just to get the knife from her grip because she was so possessed or out of it or gone, that she couldn't stop. And, so that just shows you how far gone she was. Yeah, so she also stabbed her own dog. And I believe, I'm not sure, I couldn't find if the dogs survived. It sounds like they didn't, I would assume. I wish there was more information on that, or if I just haven't come across it. And also, I wish they would release the body cam, because I think it would be really interesting to see what her facial expressions were. And I don't want to see the gory parts that much, but it would be interesting to see what they saw in her eyes specifically. But it is, the video evidence remains under seal. So she carved up his face, and it was the worst things that the medical examiner has ever seen. Also, one of the deputies had to shoot her with a taser gun 4 times, and she continued to stab herself through all of that. And when she finally came out of it, she was in the hospital. She had a lot of wounds, but she was really great. She started to also remember what had happened, and it slowly came back to her in her memory, and she stabbed herself 43 times. And her mom ended up flying down from Chicago to take care of her, and she would then go into explaining to the detectives what exactly she experienced. Then she ended up spending 6 days in jail, and she was initially charged with murder, but over the course of years-long investigation, just months before her 2023 trial, and this happened in 2018, they reduced the charge to involuntary manslaughter, because experts on both sides agree that her actions were the results of cannabis-induced psychosis. And it's also just been scientifically proven that if you give some people high levels of THC into their bloodstream, it can elicit psychotic symptoms. And obviously this can cause people to become violent in situations where otherwise they wouldn't. And they also differentiated the fact that cannabis is not like alcohol, where, violent things happen with people that are drunk all the time, but the difference is with alcohol, that it can cause you to become violent. Cannabis, you don't expect that. You don't expect yourself to become violent. Not like when you drink, you're going to become violent, but that your judgment's going to be impaired enough, and you also know that you're going to be more prone to emotional things, and you're just more, knowledgeable from real world experiences that alcohol is something you need to be cautious with in regards to how you act around others, and it's a little bit different, but it is interesting how much they differentiated it, because marijuana also impairs your judgment. It's just you never hear of it's very rare, if at all, have you ever heard of someone doing something violent because of the marijuana, whereas on alcohol, you hear all the time about drunk people fighting and drunk domestic abuse and, drunk murders. So it's interesting how much they differentiated it and basically let her off without any jail time. And from my experience, from smoking weed in the past, I can see how people get to become violent over time, because especially if they're I don't know, because you know how marijuana is known for making people paranoid? Well, people with paranoia, they'll start to feel like they have to be violent in order to protect themselves. I feel like that's one route, and then another route is just you lose all control, like in her case, and something takes over you. And it also says in this article here, it's possible depending on the degree of psychosis. So if people are perceiving things in the environment to be threatening, like paranoia, when they ordinarily wouldn't, when there is no threat, then one reaction could be fear or withdrawal, or it could be heightened aggression, which makes sense. And I think that's the same thing with people that are drunk too. It's I feel like sometimes people that are drunk could get paranoid in situations where they otherwise wouldn't be, and it causes them to overreact. So the verdict in late 2023, a California jury convicted Spejcher of involuntary manslaughter. She really thought she was going to go to prison, and she was researching prison accommodations for her disability before sentencing, but her sentence ended up including no prison time. Basically, no one could have foreseen that a single hit of marijuana that night would have caused Spejcher to have a total psychotic break from reality. And certainly not Chad, and certainly not Bryn. In the light of these facts, Judge David Worley believed that further incarceration wasn't appropriate. So he sentenced her to 2 years of probation and 100 hours community service educating the public on the dangers of THC. A lot of people are outraged and still angry about this verdict because they believe that maybe because she's a woman, she got off easier. And I do think that could be a role, because I just don't see, if a man did that, I do feel like the judge wouldn't have been so easy on a man if he had done that. But that's just my theory. And also, a lot of people don't believe that she had the induced psychosis, which is crazy because she stabbed herself 40 times. She stabbed her own dog. I mean, why would someone get high and then just use that as an excuse? She didn't have a violent past at all. I mean, you could tell just from hearing her talk that she's just a normal person that isn't a psychopath, and it really was an accident. And every time she talks about it, because I've seen her in a few different interviews, she cries, and you can tell that she's very, very remorseful for everything. And she states that if she could go back in time, she would never smoke marijuana ever in her life. And it's hard for me to see why people would think that she would make all that up just to get away with stabbing this guy. And when they've only known each other for a few months too, or I think it was not even a month, it might have been a few weeks. So it just doesn't make any sense. It's clear to me, and I've heard other people's stories from friends of friends of their drug-induced psychotic breaks and all kinds of crazy stuff. And obviously cannabis is a psychoactive drug. It's going to change how you see and perceive things, and obviously it can alter your reality. So I just don't see why people are so against that part. But I do see where they're coming from when they complain about how she didn't get any prison time because she full-on murdered someone. And yeah, it just makes you wonder, what if it were a man, or what if it was alcohol that made her do it? What would be the outcome then? So she did get really, really lucky by not having to serve any prison time. But she's still, you can tell that she grieves every day and feels absolutely awful. And she is doing her part with the community service by spreading awareness of the risks of marijuana and Especially with these times where it's becoming more and more normalized, it's more knowledge that needs to be given out. Like, people need to understand that, yeah, a lot of the times marijuana doesn't, have that such of an effect on a person, but sometimes it can. And there is a thing as too much THC, and it can obviously cause paranoia. So obviously, depending on the person and with how they react to paranoia, and there's also the genetic factor too. Like, not everyone's gonna feel the same when they smoke. If you have underlying genetic, like, mental health issues, then that's gonna play a huge role. I mean, we've all heard, well, at least I've heard, that marijuana can, if you have like a schizophrenic gene that's dormant, marijuana can trigger it and you can become schizophrenic and it can become active. So Bryn specifically didn't have any mental health diagnosis, but she didn't have a history of cutting herself. She didn't have a history of anything like that. The only history she really had was her hearing loss. So yeah, with the marijuana that Amelia gave Spejcher in 2018 was high potency, and Spejcher's attorneys presented evidence at the trial that showed Amelia ordered a 30% THC product that came with a warning that was intended for high tolerance users only. But the bong was tested, Spejcher's attorney says, and the contents were used up. So they couldn't really do like a deep dive on the weed itself that was smoked. But it's kind of clear that he put that high tolerance weed in the bong for her to smoke. And he also had that history of giving his roommate a same hit, and his roommate had that crazy reaction. So I think in his mind, he was like, well, this girl doesn't even feel high from this normal stuff. Let me bring out the high tolerance user only weed and see what she does. And honestly, like, as someone that used to smoke, it just sounds so mean to me to like purposely get someone too high. Like, if they ask for a hit of something you're smoking and they get too high from it, like, that sucks. But if you purposely like give them something strong that not even you smoke, like, why wasn't he smoking that in the first place? It's obvious that like even he was smoking the normal stuff until he switched to this higher stuff, and he was a high tolerance user, so why wasn't he smoking that from the beginning? And so it just seems like a little cruel to me for him to purposely like get her too high. But, I don't want to victim blame. It's not like he forever foresaw that happening, and it was still her choice on whether to take that hit or not. And so I just found it a little weird for him to do that, but obviously it's overall her in the wrong by a long shot. And, I just feel so bad for Chad. First, having to see your dog get stabbed by this woman that you can't console, and she's like out of control in your condo. And like, it's crazy to me that she was probably in such a strong trance that not even he could fight her off before she ended up killing him, it's so crazy. Like, she must have been so driven, like, yeah, to overpower this man. It's just so bizarre. And then, it's so horrible to think that, you're smoking weed and on your condo porch, getting ready for, to go to bed. You have a big day the next day. Maybe you have to go to work the next day, and you're just hanging out, and you've got this new friend over and you got your dogs are playing together, and you're like, well, let's see if I can get this girl, to be a high potency user like I am, and then it results in something so horrific where you end up losing your life. That's just awful. And I feel so bad for his family and his friends, and absolutely devastating. So they did recover the only source of marijuana at the scene, and that the marijuana they found was not the high potency marijuana. So they must have, like, I don't know if maybe he grabbed like a nug or two from a bag from inside the condo and left like the low potency stuff out on the porch, and like they didn't find the high potency stuff, or maybe it was like the last of it and he used that last bit of the high potency stuff for her to smoke. So, but yeah, the scientists are saying, the higher THC that cannabis gets, the more likely it is to see more and more people develop psychosis from cannabis, which totally makes sense to me. I mean, back in the 70s, marijuana was a lot more higher in CBD and a lot less higher in THC, and nowadays you get like carts that are like crazy strong, and people are having, mental health issues from it and addiction issues from it, and it's like a whole nother ball game to what was being grown naturally before dispensaries started taking over and, doing all kinds of crazy stuff to make their weed stronger, and not to mention all the pesticides they use, which is a whole nother story. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Obviously Chad's family was very devastated. His dad was heartbroken, and he warned the lenient California judge. He basically said that you're giving this girl a license to kill because of a pot-induced frenzy. He went on to say that there's no respect and no responsibility for anything anymore. He felt Sean O'Melia was very let down by the sentencing of Bryn, and he definitely, believes, understandably, that his son deserved more justice. And it's so sad because really there's two victims in this story, that the one that was murdered and the one that did the murdering, because it's not something that she would have ever done, and had she been sober, and if she would have known that would happen, she would have never smoked at all. And it really is, like, when you get down to the facts, it really is an involuntary manslaughter. But at the same time, could she have served a little prison time? I mean, maybe it would have helped with her own guilty conscience too, to help make her feel like she's getting what, relieves some of the guilt by serving a prison sentence, especially if it was going to help Chad's family feel better. So it's interesting how lenient that judge was. So obviously, the family really believed that she basically got away with murder in the way she did. So I would really like to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. Do you think that she should have served prison time? Do you believe her when she says that she had cannabis-induced psychosis? What are your thoughts on this? I would like to know, because there's a lot of controversial thoughts, and you probably disagree with some of the things that I've said in my perspective. It's also like I said earlier, how she's a girl, and I feel like that does play a part. I feel like if it were a guy that did that, who knows, cannabis might have been thrown out the window and he would have been charged for life for murder. And also there's race. She's a white girl, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say if someone was in her shoes and that happened, what would the sentence be? Did she just get really lucky with this specific judge, or is it a case of privilege? We hear about the white male privilege a lot, but there are cases where women do get away with more in the court system because they're women. Go ahead and share your thoughts, and let's take a moment to honor Chad O'Melia, and also just just keep in mind that cannabis can cause these crazy effects, and keep that in mind with your own life, and maybe do your own research to see what you find. And maybe we can prevent things like this from happening in the future if we just spread the knowledge about how cannabis isn't 100% good. I mean, there are a lot of negative side effects to using cannabis, and yeah, there are positive side effects too, but we can't just ignore the negative and focus on the positive. And we also have to keep in mind that people react to different drugs differently. We can't just say, oh, well, I've been high every single day for 65 years and I've never killed anyone. Like, obviously, that's how the majority of cannabis users are. I mean, not that they've smoked for that long, but obviously, if you've smoked marijuana, you can say that I've never killed someone because of it. And that doesn't mean that just because it didn't happen to you, it can't happen to anybody. You have to accept the fact that people experience things differently. I mean, even with perspectives, you could witness the same thing as another person and you both see two different things. You both take the same drug, but you experience a different high. Everyone's different. Everyone responds to things differently. So go ahead and let me know in the comments, and that's all for now. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.